Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare
Hare Rama,
Rama,
Ram
Rama
Ram,
Rama, Hare
Hare
Hare.
Hare.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna studies. Today we are going to hear Canto 3, Chapter 14, beginning with text 33. And it says, DTs to read Vita
Hare
Tena,
Krishna, Hare
Dharma,
Krishna,
Rajin,
Krishna
Bharat,
Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare
Upasarga,
Rama, Hare Rama.
Maharashtra, Adyo Mukh, Abhi, Dastam. O son of the Bharata family, Iti, after this, went nearer to her husband, her face lowered because of her faulty action. She spoke as follows. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. When one is ashamed of an abominable action, one naturally becomes down-faced. Deity came to her senses after the abominable sexual intercourse with her husband. Such sexual intercourse is condemned as prostitution. In other words, sex life with one's wife is equal to prostitution if the regulations are not properly followed. Text 34. Titir Uvacha Namigarbam Imam Brahmam Bhutanam Rishabho Vadit Rudrapatir Bhutanam Yasya Karavam Amhasam. The beautiful Diti said, My dear Brahman, kindly see that my embryo is not killed by Lord Shiva, the Lord of all living entities, because of the great offense I have committed against him. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Diti was conscious of her offense and was anxious to be excused by Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva has two popular names, Rudra and Asutosh. He is very prone to anger as well as quickly pacified. Diti knew that because of his being quickly angered, he might spoil the pregnancy she had so unlawfully achieved. But because he was also Ashuto, she implored her Brahmana husband to help her in pacifying Lord Shiva. For her husband was a great devotee of Lord Shiva. For her husband was a great devotee of Lord Shiva. In other words, Lord Shiva might have been angry with Diti because she obliged her husband to transgress the law, but he would not refuse her husband's prayer. Therefore, the application for excuse was submitted through her husband. She prayed to Lord Shiva as follows. We see here that Diti understands that what she did is wrong. Then why did she do it? That's the question. Why did she do something that's wrong? Well, she couldn't control her mind and senses. This is the great fault of people who are overwhelmed by lust and they know what's right, but they still do what's wrong. That seems to be an anomaly. They know what's right, but they do, and they know the difference between right and wrong, but yet they do something wrong. So that means that they have uh, weak will to follow the principles of Sanatana Dharma, and therefore they succumb easily to engaging in illicit activities. There are people like that. In the past, there are only a few people like that. But today, many people are like that. And why? Well, bad education, bad association, and there's so much uh, bad publicity, television, and movies, and books. Uh, Today, there's so many books, and they're all trash. Better to throw them away in the trash. Don't give them to any other people because you'll be engaged in corrupting people's minds by giving them bad books. And most books are bad. They're not really talking about Krishna, they're talking about so many different objects and so many different points. But we should regularly read the Holy Scriptures, especially Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. And that's what we're doing every day. Why? Because these are not ordinary books. These books are based on the principles of Sanatana Dharma, of eternal goodness and teaching self-control, and also showing what happens when one is not self-controlled. So you don't, that this way, you don't have to do something illicit in order to understand what not to do. There are different ways of understanding things. One is you hear and understand. Three is you hear, you see, but to do, you do to understand. And four is you hear, you see, you do, and then you keep doing. That's the worst, let's say, position to be in. So that seems to be the position of DT. She knew what was right, but she did what was wrong. This unfortunately happens a lot in society today. Before, in the time of DT, it was rare. But today, it's more or less happening all the time. And that's because of bad association and bad culture, the culture of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and avoiding spiritual association, avoiding books like Bhagavad Gita, and people just reading mundane literature, which is mostly about love, so-called love, but it's actually sex, and mundane topics that weakens the mind. It doesn't make it stronger. And when the mind is weakened, it's much harder to follow the rules and regulations of Sanatana Dharma. So a person with a weak mind, they will be enticed easily to break religious principles. And it seems like they get away with it. But eventually, they will be punished severely. So crime doesn't pay. Why? Because you'll eventually get caught. If you're a criminal, you're eventually going to get caught. And a hard time for a hard crime. Depending on how severe the crime is, you could stay in jail for many, many, many years. And jail is not a good place to be, because all the association in jail is bad. You're associating with criminals, right? And you have become a criminal. So it's best not even to think of doing something bad. Of course, in the age of Kali, if you think of doing something bad, you don't get the karma. You don't get punished right away. But in previous times, simply thinking of doing something bad, you get punished. That's how strict things were. Today, you have to actually commit the crime in order to get the punishment. But before, just thinking of doing bad things, you would be punished. So we can see how Kali Yuga is the most dangerous time of the universe to be alive, because in this age there's so many things that are wrong. It's like today, there's a lot of um, propaganda. Don't drink milk. So you have to be a vegan. Don't drink milk. So, uh, in one sense, you can say, well, yeah, if cows are being so badly treated, why should I drink milk? I'm only going to support the bad treatment of cows. But if you find uh, somewhere where cows are nicely treated, and then why would you deny drinking milk? So we have ahimsa milk in farms where we don't kill the cows, we don't milk them 3 times a day, we don't send them to the slaughterhouse as soon as their milk production is less. We protect them until they die naturally. So uh, people should drink the ahimsa milk, but they're just fanatics. No, no, I don't want to have milk. There's this thing wrong with it, that thing wrong with it. They're not not willing to listen. Uh, Also to what the cow protection and all that is going on in certain places. So uh, the it's important to drink milk though, because milk is soothing and very nutritious, and also it's given by cows that are taken care of and are protected. So that's a himsa milk. So there are all different things in this world. There's milk that's contaminated, and there's milk that's himsa milk that is pure. So we have to uh, avoid things that are contaminated and accept the things that are pure for our betterment. It's not that everything is bad. No. Seek and ye shall find. It's in the Bible. Seek and ye shall find. So if you seek the association of good people, you'll find them. And if you seek the association of bad people, you'll also find them. But we shouldn't think there's no such thing as good people. There are good people who follow the rules and regulations of spiritual life. At the time we had in our family, we had nurse, we had a servant. She would come and iron clothing and do clean up in the house and things like that. Because my mother and basically all the adults in the family, they were all working. So they hired this uh, service lady, and she was in I don't know, doubt, but she was a faithful what do you call a Catholic lady, nice, decent lady. So uh, one day I had caught some really nice butterflies. And of course, I had killed the butterfly, but did not too much, uh, you know, uh, too much hurt. It's beautiful designs and everything. And I was trying to pin it in this box, in which there was some cotton, and pin it so that then I could put a little glass on top of it, and that would be part of my collection of beautiful butterflies. So at one point I asked Winnie, that was her name. I was in our cellar with her, and she was ironing the clothes of the family, and I was a little bit near her, pinning up butterflies. And at one point, I asked her to help me do it by, holding some edges of the butterflies so I could pin it exactly right. And she refused. And I said, "Why is that?" And she said, "Oh, I'm a Catholic." I said, "No," she said, I believe in God." I said, "Well, I believe in God also." uh, she said, "Well, no, I won't touch anything that's been, you know, uh, in other words, anything that's been dead." And I said, "Well, I already killed it, so you don't have to worry about it." She just refused. She didn't want to have anything to do with pinning up a dead butterfly. So I was really surprised about that. So I thought she was like, ignorant. It's only years later when I became a devotee that I realized this was a highly advanced spiritual person, although she's a common worker and doesn't have any high education and things like that. But actually, she was advanced spiritually. So there are people like that. They might not be great pundits, but they have learned to not be cruel to animals or insects or anything, and to pray regularly. The Christians, their dharma is praying all the time. And they have these prayer books, the 24-hour prayer books, prayers you can say 24 hours a day, different times of the day. And real Christians, that's what they do, especially a nun will pray 24 hours a day or as much as they can. They have these books, 24-hour prayer books. And men also, monks, they have these 24-hour prayer books also. So they're, let's say, tapasya, or their, let's say, culture, spiritual culture, is to pray all the time. So if one joins a monastery of monks or a monastery of women's, they have their prayer beads and they'll be praying 24 hours a day. And it's very good. And they have, let's say, regulated times to eat. They're not eating at all times of the day. They will only eat at certain times. So in other words, they're following regulated principles, right? Unfortunately, they might be eating meat. Oftentimes they do. There are some monks and there are some, lady renunciate that won't touch meat also in the Catholic Church. So they're not all meat eaters, but there are a lot of meat eaters, unfortunately. So that's a minus right there. But there are people like this lady who was a Catholic and was our maid. She naturally was like a devotee. And she didn't eat meat either. She was like, she wouldn't do anything that was hurtful to animals. And I was surprised that, I wasn't a devotee at that time, and I was surprised. I had never met a person like that. So there are good people. They're not necessarily all, they don't have to be devotees of ISKCON. There are some good people out there that naturally develop good principles by associating with holy people. So the holy people are not only devotees. They're in ISKCON. There are other religions in which there are holy people also, and there are other religions that have people that are committing sins on a regular basis, especially in Catholicism. They have this thing that you do. You come, sit in a little booth. On one side is a priest, and the other side you're sitting there, and you're telling the priest all the sins that you committed in the last month or last week. So it's just a practice in the Catholic Church, and but that then the priest says, well, then you have to chant the Hail Mary 100 times or 1,000 times. Hail Mary is like the Maha Mantra for purification. So they'll chant their Hail Marys, and then they come back again a month later, and they they confess again the sins that they committed. So well, it's a way in the Catholic Church to help people who confess not to make that part of their life forever. I mean, but usually people just use that, don't actually stop the desire to commit sins, but they get this what you call periodic cleansing by a confession. Yeah. So that's not, I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's not really the ideal thing. The ideal thing is to give up doing sinful things. But see, in Catholicism, eating meat is not considered sinful. But I mean, they don't know that it's sinful because they haven't been taught that it's sinful. Because the priests also eat meat. Now, there are some priests that don't eat meat. They have, there's different sections of priests in Christianity, and there are some that are vegetarian, but most of them are not. Okay, so yeah, there was this one Armenian priest that I was learning that I was very close to, and he was teaching me the Bible and so forth. And but his philosophy was, if you don't enjoy in the material world, how will you enjoy in the spiritual world? In other words, you're saying you have to enjoy, in other words, engage in sex and sense gratification in the material world in order to enjoy in the spiritual world. I mean, it was like I mean, at the time when he told me that, I didn't know that it was nonsense. But later on, I realized he was nonsense, and he was nonsense. He fell down from the priesthood. So it's very important not to have false narratives in one's life, and not to be weak-minded to accept false narratives. And if you can't make your mind up if something is a real narrative or a false narrative, you should ask more advanced people, is this right or is this wrong? So the beautiful deity said, my dear Brahmana, kindly see that my embryo is not killed by Lord Shiva, the Lord of all living entities, because of the great offense I have committed against him. Well, she knows something is wrong, but she still does it. So why is that? Well, it's because of lust. Lust is the worst enemy of the human being, and it causes people to get in to commit sinful activities, even though they know it's wrong. And that's the case of Diti. And here it says in purport in verse 34, the beautiful in purport it says, Diti was conscious of her offense and was anxious to be excused by Lord Shiva. So a person is conscious of their offense. but still they did it. This is the problem in life today, that everybody knows what the truth is, but sometimes people don't follow the truth. Or most of the time in this age, people don't follow the truth, although they know what's right and what's wrong. So they find excuses. Of course, there are people that haven't not at all been educated at what's right and wrong. But a lot of people know what's right and wrong, and still they would do it. Just like Diti, she knew what was right and what is wrong, but she still engaged in doing something wrong. So if we have that type of weakness, then we must associate all the time with saintly people, so that when we have this, seizure of weakness, we have someone to talk to help us understand and have the, let's say, right association, so that we don't do it. If you see in this age, in previous ages, if you thought of doing something bad, you would immediately get the karmic reaction. In Kali Yuga, because it's a very, very bad time. If you think of doing something bad, you won't get the karmic reaction. You have to actually do it. So that's one compensation of one, let's say, a good thing in Kali Yuga. But in previous ages, if you just thought of doing something bad, you would get the karmic reaction. So today, if we want to avoid, unnecessary trouble, then we should always associate with devotees and always hear the Bhagavatam spoken by genuine devotees and Bhagavad Gita spoken by genuine devotees, so that the mire or filth of material association does not affect us. Just like you might work and you get dirty hands, or you might sweat a lot, but you go and take a bath on a regular basis. There are some people that don't like to bathe too much. They might bathe like only once a week. And there was a time when people were, not so opulent as today in the United States. And they had a bathtub, and then once a week, the father would get in the bathtub first. It wasn't a shower; it was a bathtub, right? And then he would soak himself up and so forth, and then rinse, and then dry himself, put his clothes on. Then the wife would get in the same bathtub the husband used, and then after that, the kids would get in the same bathtub that was used already. It's because time at that time people were let's say not so rich. They were very poor, and they had conserved things like water. You have to pay for water, and they did not want to waste any money because they were not very rich. So they would do things like that. The kid would get into the bathtub full of water, and the water was already used for bathing of like 3 or 4 other people in the family. Now you can't imagine doing anything like that, can you? No, but people did do that in the past, because they were not, they were poor. And that would only be once a week, by the way. Most people were just bathing once a week. They didn't have the shower every day, or 2 times a day, or 3 times a day. They would just bathe once a week. And in France, they would hardly bathe at all. But they had French perfume. They would use that, not to bathe in, but it sort of masked smelly bodies. And then in Versailles is a very beautiful, abundant building, a high class building where the kings would used to live. But there was no toilet in Versailles. So what would people do? There were very rich people. They would just step out of their room, pass stool in the hallway, and urine, and then the servants would come and clean it. See if you can see that on yeah, that's what they would do. These were the high class people, the kings and princes and princesses and things like that. They would just pass through in the hallway and urine because they didn't have bathrooms. And then servants would come and clean it. Unimaginable, right? But it's not something completely rare. Like today, you have homeless people. They're defecating on the street, urinating on the street, basically living in the street. And it's almost the same thing as what people were doing, the high class people were doing in previous times. What did you see?
There were what was the result? I mean, what was the result of the lack of plumbing at Versailles? There were hundreds of guests and servants on hand on any given day in Versailles with no facilities to use. The result was a high concentration of people using hallways, the outdoors of personal commodes that were dumped collectively, creating a notoriously awful odor around the palace.
See? You didn't know that.
Mhm.
That's why you have to come to class, learn all these gruesome things. Yeah, and just imagine, they're not taking any bath, and even they don't even have toilets. Right? And this is in a palace, Versailles, beautiful palace, right? But they didn't have any toilets there, so the people would just pass through in the hallway, and then the servants would come and clean it. Haribo. Okay, so we should count our blessings. We have Prabhupada and Vedic knowledge, and we have the opportunity today with the night bathrooms, and you can take showers or you can take baths. So it's a different time today. Previously in France, they didn't take baths, or they would once a week go to a bathhouse and take a bath. But it wasn't, every day. And so you can see life was a lot more difficult in those days. And that's why they had perfumes, French perfumes, because they would just wake up and then just wash their face and hands in a bowl. And because they didn't have bathrooms and they didn't have, showers and things like that. And they would just put some perfume on it. That was it, Maybe once a week they would go to a bath house. There were bath houses, and they would take a full bath there. So you see, life is different in different times in history. And a lot of French houses didn't have bathrooms. So let's say you lived on the fourth floor, fifth floor, and you have to go all the way down into the on the ground and the bath stool somewhere. Dogs. Sometimes people didn't go down; they would just sort of do it in bags or something, and then let's say you live on the fifth or sixth floor and there's no commode, there's no, so it was difficult. It was very, very difficult to stay hygienic. And that's why people get bubonic plague. Look that up, bubonic plague, because of not being clean.
Was that because of the lack of resources or?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have, like we have bathrooms, right? And you turn the spigot on, the water comes in. They didn't have that. So they'd have to go somewhere and bring water up to their room and use that to groom themselves, to stay a little bit clean. No, life was different. Life was different, especially if you lived in the big cities like Paris. They didn't have, bathrooms and running water and all that stuff. So it's much more complicated to keep yourself clean. That's why they had perfumes. So to mask the smell of the human body. What does it say?
Bubonic plague is patients develop fever, headache, chills, and weakness, and one or more swollen, painful lymph nodes. This form is usually the result of an infected flea bite. The bacteria multiply in a lymph node near where the bacteria entered the human body.
Yeah, there were a lot of horrible things like the bubonic. There were periodic times where everybody would get sick and die. So not everybody died, but everyone would get sick. And they were called plagues, Plagues, whatever. So and that was because most of the time it was because of bad cleanliness.
Hygiene.
Yeah, bad hygiene. Okay, so verse 34, the beautiful Diti said, "My dear Brahmana, kindly see that my embryo is not killed by Lord Shiva, the Lord of all living entities, because of the great offense I have committed against him, against Lord Shiva, by not following, the principles of Dharma." So Diti was conscious of her offense and was anxious to be excused by Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva has two popular names, Rudra and Asutosh. He is very prone to anger, that's Rudra, as well as quickly pacified, Asutosh, quickly forgives. Diti knew that because of his being quickly angered, he might spoil the pregnancy she had so unlawfully achieved. But because he, meaning Shiva, was also Ashutosh, one who easily or quickly will forgive, she employed her Brahmana husband to help her in pacifying Lord Shiva, for her husband was a great devotee of Lord Shiva. In other words, Lord Shiva might have been angry with Diti because she obliged her husband to transgress the law, but he would not refuse her husband's prayer. Therefore, the application for excuse was submitted through her husband. She prayed to Lord Shiva as follows. So this is, let's call it a good strategy by Diti to try and lessen the effect of her sinful activity by her husband supplicating. Her husband's a good devotee, supplicating Lord Shiva to please forgive her. She doesn't know what she's doing, etc. But the problem is that she convinced her husband to break the rules and regulations. This is somewhat similar to the Adam and Eve. Eve, in the time of Adam and Eve, there was no sins committed. They were living in heaven, and but there was one tree. There was the tree of knowledge and ignorance, and there were many trees in the paradise. But there was one tree that we were forbidden to eat from, the tree of knowledge and ignorance. And so Adam and Eve were told by God, don't eat from this one tree. Don't eat the apples from this one tree. But you can eat the apples from all the other trees. There's plenty of them. But the devil convinced Eve to eat the apple from the forbidden tree on the plea that God was hiding some very higher level sense gratification, and therefore she should eat the forbidden fruit to get better sense gratification. It's always about sense gratification. And the devil enticed her, and she did, and she bit the apple, and as soon as she bit the apple on the forbidden tree, she felt shame. And because before Adam and Eve would walk around naked, because there were, there was no sinfulness. But now the devil, by convincing Eve to bite into the forbidden apple from the forbidden tree, then she became shameful and tried to hide her nudity. But misery likes company. Always remember that. Misery likes company. So then Eve was able to convince Adam also to bite the forbidden apple. And he did. And then he also felt shame. And he also tried to hide his nudity. And then so both of them, because they violated the rules of God, due to the misinformation they got, the misinformation Eve got from God, and then from the devil, and then she convinced her husband also to bite the apple. From that point on, the husband has to work really hard to maintain a wife and a family, and the wife, she has to go through childbirth, which is very, let's say, troublesome and painful, and also dangerous. A lot of women used to die because of unclean habits and a lack of good knowledge with the doctors. Doctors sometimes would perform operations, and birth of women are going through in very unhygienic situations. And a lot of women would die. It was a dangerous. Even today, sometimes women die when they're pregnant because of complications that they have. And the childbirth is not an easy thing for a woman. Is that right? Yeah, it can be very painful, especially when you're going through the period.
The labor.
Labor, yeah, going through labor. It can be very, very painful. Okay, so okay, so it says here now, text 36. I'm going to read the purport a little bit more. Huh?
35.
Oh, 35. I'm sorry. Okay, so 35. Let me offer my obeisances unto the angry Lord Shiva, who is simultaneously the very ferocious, great demigod and the fulfillment of all material desires. He is all auspicious and forgiving, but his anger can immediately move him to chastise. Okay, so DT knows a lot about Lord Shiva, especially the fact that although he's very merciful, he can also get angry really quickly. So Diti prayed for the mercy of Lord Shiva very cleverly. Whoa. Strange word, strange thing to say. She's trying to be clever with a very exalted devotee Lord Shiva. She prayed, the Lord can cause me to cry, but if he likes, he can also stop my crying because he is Ashutosh, very easily forgives people. He is so great that if he likes, he can immediately destroy my pregnancy, but by his mercy, he can also fulfill my desire that my pregnancy not be spoiled. Because he is all auspicious, it is not difficult for him to excuse me from being punished, although he is now ready to punish me because I have moved his great anger. He appears like a man, but he is the Lord of all men. Well, basically, she's trying to, let's say, butter up or to, convince Lord Shiva not to really be very hard with her and really, smash her down because she's committed such a simple act of basically making her husband fall down. Now, she's praying for the mercy of Lord Shiva very cleverly. So that means that she's trying to, let's say, get something, some advantage by pretending to be very penitent. Look that word up, penitent. So Diti prayed for the mercy of Lord Shiva very cleverly. She prayed, the Lord can cause me to cry, but if he likes, he can also stop my crying because he is Ashutosh, very easily placated or forgiving. What you found it?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Feeling or expressing remorse for misdeeds.
Well, let's say the name of the word first.
Penitent.
Penitent. Yeah. And read it again.
Feeling or expressing remorse
Right.
for misdeeds.
Exactly. So that's exactly what that's her strategy here. So let me offer my obeisances unto the angry Lord Shiva, who is simultaneously the very ferocious great demigod and the fulfiller of all material desires. He is all auspicious and forgiving, but his anger can immediately move him to chastise. Purport, I should qualify. Diti prayed for the mercy of Lord Shiva very cleverly. She prayed, the Lord can cause me to cry, but if he likes, he can also stop my crying because he is Ashutosh. Now, that's a significant statement in several ways. Number one, it's saying that, well, it indicates that when women are, let's say, in a difficult situation, maybe they're caught lying or something like that, and right away they're crying. And that is so that they can be forgiven. And oftentimes when there's difficult situations, women will cry, and then people feel sorry for them, and so they say, "Well, it's okay, I forgive you," blah blah blah. So the Lord can cause me to cry, but if he likes, he can also stop my crying, because he is Ashutosh, and easily forgives. He is so great that if he likes, he can immediately destroy my pregnancy, but by his mercy, he can also fulfill my desire that my pregnancy not be spoiled. Because he is all auspicious, it is not difficult for him to excuse me from being punished, although he is now ready to punish me because I have moved his great anger. He appears like a man, but he is the Lord of all men. So she's praying to Lord Shiva. So this is like, well, once there were these birds, and these birds were able to speak. And one day there was a whole bunch of birds in this one tree. You see that here also sometimes. There are like, hundreds of birds in one tree. They're all making their noise, chirping away. And while they were on the tree, they saw a hunter come. And the hunter came. But when he saw all the birds, and I sort of stepped back and started hiding behind the tree, waiting for to see, how he could trick the birds and catch them. And the birds started talking to each other. Said, "Oh," and the hunter could hear them. And they said, "Oh, there is a hunter hiding behind a tree, waiting to trick us so he can catch us, take us away, and eat us." So when the hunter heard them speak like that, he said, "Oh my God, doesn't look like I'm going to get any birds today. These are exceptional birds, they can speak." And they seen me hiding behind this tree. But then he thought, well, let me just stay here a little bit and see what's going to happen. Well, what he had done was, when he first came, he put a lot of grain in the ground near where the tree where the birds were. So the birds said, "The hunter has put grain to trick us so that we will go down and eat it, and he'll catch us in his net." So he had put a net on the ground, and he had put grain on top of it. So as soon as the birds would come down to eat the grain, he would catch them. Okay? So the birds know this, and they say it out loud. "The hunter is behind this tree, and he put this net down on the ground, and he covered it with grain, and he thinks that we will come down and eat the grain, and then he'll catch us." So when the hunter heard this, he's looking at the birds up in the tree, and they're looking at him directly, and they're speaking out loud like this. He thought, "Oh my God, I'm not going to get any birds today." But then he decided, let me just sit here a little bit, and let's see what happens. So a little time goes by, and the birds say, "Well, we're very hungry. Maybe we should risk eating the nice grains that the hunter has put on top of the trap." So they all go down and start eating the grain, and the trap closes. The hunter comes and catches all the birds. And as he's walking away with his bundle of birds, the birds say, "Oh, we were so stupid that we went down to eat the grain, and now the hunter is taking us to kill us." Well, this is the dilemma or the problem of people. They know what's going to happen if they engage in sinful activities, but still they do it. They know because they've seen other people, like for example, you go to movies and you'll see, the bad guys, they get away with murder, but then later on, they get caught and they go to jail. Most of the time, that's a theme in these movies. At first, the bad guys get away with what they're doing, and eventually, the police or someone catches up to them, and then they get punished and put in the jail, or they're killed. That's the theme of most movies. So you see that, people see that, but yet they think they can get away with things. So there was this one boy I know, and he had just graduated in high school, he was going to college. And I asked him a question. I said, if you could make a lot of money by cheating, would you do it? And he thought about it for about a minute, and then he said to me, "I would do it if I thought I could get away with it." Well, this is what every thief thinks. They think that, I'm so smart, and I can get away with this. But crime doesn't pay because you're always going to get caught sooner or later. And if you're not caught in this lifetime, you're going to get caught by Yamaraj and when you die. And then the suffering is even worse. It's better to get caught and go to jail and or suffer now in the human body than to get away with the crime and then be tortured by Yamaraj when you die. So it's better for a criminal to get caught and to go to jail and suffer, let's say, because if they get away with the crime when they die, the suffering is much worse, much, much worse. Of course, the dacoits and so forth, they don't know this, or if they hear it, they don't believe it. Okay, now are there any questions about this? D.T. prayed for the mercy of Lord Shiva very cleverly. So is that the right way to pray to Lord Shiva or to any exalted devotee? No, it's not, because there is an agenda. There should be no agenda. One should be completely surrendered when we pray to the mercy and ask for the mercy of God. But if we have an agenda, something that we know is wrong, but we want to sugarcoat it with appearing to be penitent and feeling sorry and blah, 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 but actually, if they're forgiven, they'll go back and do it again. So when it says D.T. prayed for the mercy of Lord Shiva very cleverly, she prayed, the Lord can cause me to cry, but if he likes, he can also stop my crying because he is Achutos. He is so great that if he likes, he can immediately destroy my pregnancy, but by his mercy, he can also fulfill my desire that my pregnancy not be spoiled. Because he is all auspicious, it is not difficult for him to excuse me from being punished, although he is now ready to punish me because I have moved his great anger. He appears like a man, but he is the Lord of all men. So she's sort of buttering him up so that he won't do the inevitable and punish her. So the next verse 36 says, let me be pleased, let him be pleased with us, since he is my brother-in-law, the husband of my sister Sati. He is also the worshipable Lord of all women. He is the personality of all opulence and can show mercy towards women who are excused even by the uncivilized hunters. Whoa. Purport. Lord Shiva is the husband of Sati, one of the sisters of D.T. D.T. invoked the pleasure of her sister Sati so that Sati would request her husband, meaning Lord Shiva, to excuse her. Besides that, Lord Shiva is the worshipable Lord of all women. He is naturally very kind towards women, on whom even the uncivilized hunters also show their mercy. Since Lord Shiva is himself associated with women, he knows very well their defective nature. And he might not take very seriously D.T.'s unavoidable offense, which occurred due to her faulty nature. Every virgin girl is supposed to be a devotee of Lord Shiva. D.T. remembered her childhood worship of Lord Shiva and begged his mercy. Okay, so does that mean that when in your childhood you're very, let's say, surrendered to Lord Shiva? As you get older, that whole surrender weakens, and then you become attracted to sinful things. You see, when you're a child, you listen to what the parents tell you to do. But then when you go to school, you have some bad association, then you're willing to not follow everything your parents tell you to do, not follow, what your parents are trying to teach you, how to control your senses, avoid the association with bad people, regularly pray and come to the temple and do seva and so forth. So when kids go into teenage life and start associating with all kinds of nonsense people in school, their, let's say, fervent desire to serve Krishna becomes weakened seriously, and they're not so interested in following all the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. So basically, when it says here that every virgin girl is supposed to be a devotee of Lord Shiva. Diti remembered her childhood worship of Lord Shiva and begged his mercy. Well, I mean, today we're not teaching young girls to worship Lord Shiva, we're teaching them to worship Krishna. Right? But traditionally, young girls, virgin girls, would worship Lord Shiva so they could get a good husband. Let's put it like that. So Lord Shiva is very kind. He is also easily forgiving. But on the other hand, he has a bad temper. He can get angry very quickly. So, since Lord Shiva is himself associated with women, he had a wife, he knows very well their defective nature, and he might not take seriously Diti's unavoidable offense, which occurred due to her faulty nature. Well, how did she develop that faulty nature? That's what we should find out about. Obviously, she was thinking about or seeing something that was sinful, and it affected her. Now, this was a long time ago, and it was a rare thing to see publicly, sinful activities. Today, it's not rare. You go all over the internet, you watch television, and you watch movies, and you're seeing all kinds of sinful things. So kids can be easily contaminated today due to the due to what you call pornography. Previously in America, pornography was forbidden. It was a crime. You could get arrested. But at a certain point in the 1960s, when there was a change of culture, pornography became legal. And now you see it all over the place, on television, movies, books, magazines, whereas before all that was forbidden. And you could get arrested if you were selling pornographic books and things like that. So why was that? Why was it forbidden? Because it corrupts the minds of people, especially young people. They get corrupted by looking at pornographic magazines and movies. So why should that be permitted? Well, it's because of the misinterpretation of the First Amendment, I think, of the Constitution. It's free speech. So if there's free speech, then you cannot stop pornographic magazines and things like that, because then you're violating the First Amendment of the Constitution. Look that up. Is it the First Amendment or Second Amendment? I'm not sure. Well, see, that is a false interpretation of that amendment. When the founders of this country established the First Amendment of the Constitution, which gives you free speech, it didn't mean that you could say, you could start talking all kinds of nonsense and talking about sex and things like that openly all the time. What does it say? First Amendment.
The freedom of speech is the First Amendment.
Right. But does that mean that you can talk nasty things all the time? This is the question. Some people, say that, well, the First Amendment permits me to talk all kinds of rubbish stuff. You can't stop me. It's the First Amendment. That was not the meaning of the First Amendment. But it's interpreted like that today. And therefore, you see all rubbish talk nowadays, all over the place. And you can't really stop it because First Amendment, yeah, sometimes in the past, when people would talk rubbish things and very, nasty things, sometimes their tongues were cut out. You know how devastating it is to get your tongue cut out? Oh my God, you can't talk, you can't eat properly. Basically, you can die by that. Tongue is very important. And the tongue, there's a saying in language that says that the tongue doesn't have a bone. Therefore, you can twist it any way you want. And you can say
You can
anything
change,
you want.
you can change the truth.
You speak the truth sometimes, you can lie sometimes. It doesn't have.
But it's just a time check.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So 38.
All right, we'll stop right there. If there's some questions. And can you continue later on today, our short statement of wisdom, and tonight we'll have a lecture again. More discussion. Like Krishna, always to see
Prabhupada ki jai. Any questions right now?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I have a question. So Kashyap Muni was like a very learned Brahmana, right? And he knew what is right and wrong, but still he acted in a way in which he shouldn't have acted. So is it like by some kind of Lord's plan that he want to make him an instrument to serve some purpose? Let's say like bringing the demons into the world so that he can deliver them? Or is it like because of weakness of heart of Kashyap Muni?
Well, what is being demonstrated here is the power of a woman who is not controlled by the principles of Krishna consciousness, and it can corrupt a man to also break the principles. So Kashyap really knew what was right and wrong, but because he was attached to his wife, and his wife has this intense desire to have sex, but it was not, you can't say it was completely illicit because she wanted to have sex to have a child. It wasn't just to enjoy sex, but still, he tried to tell her it's the wrong time of the day to do this, and the end result will be bad. Our children won't be good. But she couldn't control her, lusty desire, even though it was to have children. So she was not able to wait for the right time. So the purpose was right. She wanted to have sons, but she was so overwhelmed by lusty desire that she couldn't control herself. And unfortunately, her husband was attached to her. That weakened his resolve to do the right thing. So he succumbed. And therefore, the children that they had were demons. And that's what happens when you do things at the wrong time, and when that type of activity is forbidden, and it's not regulated, not following regulative principles, then the children are born. In other words, Krishna will put a child of bad, let's say, behavior into the womb of the mother because of violating the correct time and violating the proper wisdom of following regulative principles. So in life, we can learn what to do and what not to do by hearing. But some people don't understand by hearing, but they may understand by seeing. And there are other people that don't understand by hearing and seeing. They have to learn by doing. And there are other people that don't understand by seeing and hearing, seeing, and doing. They have to do it. And there are other people that see, that hear, that see, that do, and then keep doing. They don't understand at all. So the best thing is you learn by hearing. Next best is you learn by hearing, but also by seeing. And the third level is you hear, you see, but you do to know, to learn. And the fourth, fifth, sixth level is you see, you hear, you see, you do, and then you just keep doing. So that's the worst. So we should learn by hearing, not by doing. But if you have to, you have to do. But the best way, like in other words, you see someone jump over a cliff and die. And you think, wow, that was a really cool thing to do. No, it's not a cool thing to do, right? It's like there's certain types of animals that jump over a cliff. One jumps over a cliff, and then all the other animals follow. They will jump over the cliff. Right? So that's not a very good thing to do. It's ignorance. So we should. But if we're going to follow someone, you should follow a pure devotee, follow their example of Krishna consciousness. But if you follow a demon or not nonsense people, then your life is very, very dangerous. So it all depends who we follow. If we follow genuine devotees, we will be protected by the mercy of the Lord. We won't make mistakes in life. We'll have a peaceful, happy life. If we follow nonsense people, like for example, my sister-in-law, she's married to my brother. She was a chain smoker, and then eventually she had to have a ventilator that she would not carry, but she had a rolling thing that she could have the ventilator next to her all the time, or walk with it when she went outside to walk. Because she, basically ruined her lungs by inhaling so much smoke by smoking. And I asked her, I said, well, how did you learn how to smoke? Or why did you start smoking? She said, well, in the 1940s, when I was a young girl, I saw these movies where there was the Humphrey Bogart and Clark Gable, and they were always smoking, and it looked so cool. That's when I started smoking. Now, by the way, Humphrey Bogart and Clark Gable were both paid to smoke cigarettes on the big screen in the movie by the cigarette companies. And many young people became influenced to smoke because it seemed to be the cool thing to do, because their heroes like Clark Gable and Humphrey Bogart, always had a cigarette in their mouth in the movie. You see, and that was purposely done by the cigarette companies. They paid them big money to do that. So it's very dangerous. Life is very dangerous when you have people who have an agenda to contaminate you, like smoking. They want to sell cigarettes. And even today, even after so many people have died of cancer from drug smoking, on every cigarette pack, it says, you will get sick from cancer if you smoke. Still, they buy the cigarettes. And they can read it, but they haven't stopped smoking. Is that true? Yeah, it's true. So you see, it's like the birds. They see the bird catcher. They saw him put the seeds underneath the tree where all the birds are. They see the bird catcher hiding, waiting for them to go down and eat the seeds. And the seeds are on top of a net that the bird catcher put there, and then he put some leaves on top of it, and then he put the seeds on top of it. And they all say, oh, and there he is, he's putting down the net, and now he's covering with leaves, and puts seeds on top. Now he's hiding behind a tree, waiting for us to go down and start eating the seeds, and the hunter's hearing all this. Right? But still, he said, well, let me just stay a little bit longer and see what happens. And what happens, the birds go down, they eat the seeds, they get caught in a trap, the hunter comes and takes them away to kill them. And the bird said, oh no, now we got caught and he's going to kill us. Right? So that's basically what's happening in society. People know that crime doesn't pay, but still they commit crimes. They know that cigarettes can kill you eventually. They keep smoking. They know everything. You can't say, I don't know. There's an internet today. And you can just go on the internet and find out about things. But that doesn't mean people stop doing those bad things. That's very dangerous lifestyle. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Sorry we went over time.
Hare Krishna. Any other questions? If not, we'll see you in the evening.
Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare
Thank you.
Krishna, Krishna Krishna.